Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters Business, your source for everything business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres. Keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, moneymatterstoptips.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have John Hill on the line. He's founder over at Adapted Growth and co-host at the Sales Throwdown podcast. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
So sales, how you can help business owners get more sales. I'm excited about today's topic and talking about the technical side of things and what CRMs look like and why business owners need to convert from these old, dated Excel spreadsheets. But before we do get into that, let's just give an overview of what you're doing over at Adapted Growth. So tell us a little bit more about the company, please.
You know, you hit the nail pretty much on the head. I'd been in sales for a very long time and started out in B2C and then did a bunch of retail and then got an invite to go do medical devices, my first B2B role. And I always did fairly well. And then when I moved into B2B, I struggled. And that struggle at the time was terrible. But now looking back on it, I'm incredibly grateful for it because that's what put me on the path to where I am now. And what happened after that is, I struggled for a while, kind of flailed around, couldn't really figure it out. And then a friend invited me to come, talk to his sales coach. And not so nice words that I don't need a coach. I just need more time, kind of like what every salesperson does. And then decided, hey, let's give this a shot. And that is when I started to really learn about, process and making it repeatable. And then me being me, I decided to go that extra mile and figure out how we can use technology to actually track what is working and then make improvements. And that's kind of where Adapted Growth came from was, if you're tracking anything, you're ahead of the game because I talk to a lot of companies and a lot of entrepreneurs who aren't really tracking anything. They're trying to hold it all in their head. So even if you are using a spreadsheet, good for you because you're doing better than most people are. That being said, there's some key areas where spreadsheets don't really help us out or they kind of fall down on the job, especially as we get more and more into this area where there's social media and digital marketing and things like that. Being able to track all those different areas so that way you can figure out what's working and what isn't is really important whenever you're trying to prioritize and really trying to forecast what you're going to do in the future from a sales perspective.
I love it. And to me, it's one of those things that you're not to make fun of our Excel sheets. All right, I agree. We shouldn't do that. But I can just tell in my own business, the more data you get, it's just so cumbersome, having 20, 30 things and you have a different channel. You have a new lead source coming in. Now you're going to create another spreadsheet. And how do those talk to each other? And how does this? And they don't. And when it comes down to it, the CRM and customizing it, life can be easier. So let's talk a little bit more about how customizing and why customizing CRMs specifically to businesses can work. Because I think there's some people listening right now that are like, oh, I don't need a CRM, or that doesn't necessarily apply to us because we're not a quote unquote sales organization. But the thing that most people don't realize is you have a business. Somebody's your client on the other end. I don't care what it is. Somebody's your client. So right now, John Hill is my client. Why? Because I'm interviewing him. So there you go. Somebody's your client. So tell us a little bit more about customizing and why businesses need to think about that.
Well, the first thing to remember is that I'm a very small segment of salespeople on the planet who actually see a ton of value in logging and tracking everything I possibly can so that way I can try to get improvement, whether it's through, other people in this world from a business perspective or coaches or things like that. If you don't know where you are, then it doesn't really matter how or which way you take, right? I go the opposite way and probably track a little too much of everything, but because of that,
that's who I want running my CRM, though. That's why you're in the right business. So that's the exact right thing to say to be a founder of Adapted Growth. You better do that. Go ahead. I had to.
No. There's so much opportunity for salespeople to spend time doing the wrong kind of things, right? And when we look at people, especially people who are in a biz dev role, and they're taking that kind of very traditional biz dev approach. There's a lot of coffees, there's a lot of networking, there's a lot of just new relationships that are being formed. if you don't really sit down and have a process, because it's much more than the CRM, if I'm being really honest. Lots of people use a CRM but don't have any process and then can't really figure out why they should be using it, right? But when there's a process that is created, you can follow it, right? And then you can take your high performers and figure out what they're doing and put that into a process and then share that with the lower performers. And then, a rising tide raises all ships, right? The more you can take that knowledge from the top performers and the owners and the people that have moved up and disseminate that down, the more that everybody should grow. Unfortunately, in a lot of sales organizations, there's this kind of culture of, I figured it out on my own, you go figure it out on your own, and go make something happen, right? Not a lot of guidance, not a lot of help, not a lot of, any of these things that we know to be important, because everyone is so busy kind of like looking out for their own book of business, right? If you can take the time to figure out what a good process is and then match that with a CRM, it takes some of that pressure off of like new people about not knowing where to go. It helps like managers and like other, high performers on the team about feeling conflicted about, do I spend time with the new guy who might not be here, or do I just kind of like manage my own book and just kind of hope that that's going to be enough in the long run for the promotion I eventually want. And so, having that process just starts there, right? And then you can figure out, are you spending time with the right people? Are you spending time with unqualified prospects? Are you spending too much time chasing, right? There's a lot more that goes into it, but starting with tracking and knowing your numbers is the first key milestone.
What's the low-hanging fruit out there? So meaning there's some business owners listening right now that are like, oh, I know I need to do this, and 2020, that's one of our goals. What's the low-hanging fruit like in that first step that if somebody's listening and they have been, let's say, on the opposite end of the spectrum from you, so they don't really track anything, or maybe they have the Excel. Let's say they have Excel spreadsheets. Let's just say that. So they have something, because we have to provide some value. I want to think that they at least understand why they should be tracking. If they don't got that, then we can't do that in our 15 minutes together today. That's going to need a little bit more. I might need some counseling on that one.
Sure.
You got to track. So let's say, what's some low-hanging fruit for our spreadsheet users out there, John?
One of the best things to do is to start thinking about the behaviors and the activities you do that get you to business, right? And these could be, they're called different things depending upon who you talk to. KPIs, leading indicators. KPI stands for key predictive indicator. But what most people want to do is they just want to look at the results, right? Hey, I closed this deal, I landed this client, or anything else. And they don't really take the time to figure out what leading indicators, what activities and behaviors that you have to do weekly and monthly to get that kind of pipeline. So that way you're, at least aware of that, right? Because when you hire someone and let's say that you're giving them mentally 6 months of ramp up time, they need to be in production mode within 6 months. If they're not there in month 5, they're not probably coming to you asking for help trying to get on that path. They might be looking for the next thing, right? So from a coaching perspective, right, if you can give people, activity counts for like each week, from like prospecting to follow up to, managing their existing clients and stuff like that, that's going to put you so farther ahead of everybody else just from being able to coach proactively, as opposed to always being concerned about why you're losing people who, should be good, but they just never really kind of made traction, right? That happens a lot with the people that I talk to. John, we keep losing these people and they're so good on paper. And it's like, well, how much coaching are they giving you? Well, I'm available. Well, that's not necessarily the same thing. You gotta look for opportunities until you form the level of relationships that your people know that they can come to you and get help without, getting brushed off or, feeling nervous or something along those lines. Does that make sense?
That's awesome. Absolutely. So John, final 2 questions. So,
Sure.
Number 1, if somebody is listening to this and they want to follow up, number 1, what are the right type of question or the right type of companies and or niches that you like working with? Number 2, what's the best way for them to reach out?
A great question. We have been able to work with a range of different companies. I came from a website design agency, and so I've got a lot of love for agency people, especially the kind of smaller people who, they're getting it done through contractors and stuff like this, but want to scale eventually, and part of that scale is hiring a sales team. That's where the original passion came from, was helping people balance better servicing clients and selling. So that way you don't feel conflicted about which one you have to do on a certain day. But we've also get a lot of, or received a lot of love from the people in these kind of not, this is going to sound bad, but like the not sexy industries, like logistics, shipping, manufacturing.
Logistics is sexy to me, first of all. I like getting my Amazon packages on time. So you keep on, whatever, go ahead.
you and me both, but like what happens is like with those kinds of industries, they don't really get, hit on, for lack of a better term, as much from like people that are, consultants and marketers and stuff like this. And I'm not really a marketer, but a lot of what I do kind of has a lot of overlap with like digital marketing, right? It's basically a numbers game, and you're trying to pull as much information in and then solve for the weakest part. So there hasn't really been an industry who's come to us and we're like, we're not going to be able to help you. It's more about a size component for me specifically. Small teams are great. Anyone under about 10 or less is going to be my sweet spot. Anybody over and above that, I would be a little bit nervous because I haven't done a project at that range.
Awesome. And what's the best way for them to reach out?
Oh, great question. Yeah. My email is john@adaptedgrowth.com.
Perfect. Well, hey, John, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing more about your background and all the great work you're doing. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review on the Apple iTunes store. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, let's keep the conversation going. Don't let it end here. Leave us some comments in the video section or the comment section of the video, and tell us more about what you think about updating these, about CRM, implementation, all these other things we talked about today. And John, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.